Good morning, Year 11. I hope you're well and having a lovely day. Please could you write the date and title? The title is How to Write a Jekyll and Hyde Essay. For your do now. All human beings, as we meet them, are commingled out of good and evil. What do you think? Pause the video for a couple of minutes to jot down your thoughts. So, as we've talked about before, in your Jekyll and Hyde exam, there'll be two options. Firstly, the extract question, where you compare an extract with two other key moments in the novel in light of the question. And then you have the discursive question, where you explore 2 to 3 key moments in light of the question. It helps to point you in the direction of an argument and can make for a very sophisticated piece of writing. Both questions are worth 40 marks and have the same mark scheme. So this is the mark scheme. We've looked at it repeatedly, so you don't need to write it down again. You need language analysis with terminology, structure analysis with terminology, quotes, context, reader response, personal response, and critical style. And we've also gone through the step-by-step for the extract quite a few times. You read the question, highlight or underline key words, and annotate with key ideas. Then you read the extract, and highlight or annotate the parts that would enable you to answer the question, analysing language and structure. Then you choose 2 more moments that would enable you to answer the question and analyse language and structure, and then if you like, you can write out the codes for the mark scheme to help keep you on track. So we've done that quite a few times, including in the live lesson that we've had recently. So today's focus is going to be on the discursive question. Like I said, people do well on both questions. The majority of people tend to choose the extract because you have all the quotes already there for you for about 50% of your essay. So it's easier to pick a number of really detailed quotes because you have the extract there. However, it may be that in the exam there's an extremely difficult extract that you're struggling with, and the discursive questions actually you think is quite easy, in which case you may choose to do the discursive. So it's really worth, even if you've got it in your mind you prefer the extract, it is worth knowing how to do the discursive just in case the exam throws you a curveball and you really like the discursive and don't like the extract. So these are the steps I would like you to write out in your book. Firstly, it's the same as the extract question, step 1. You read the question and highlight or underline key words and annotate with key ideas. Your next step, which is different, you're going to consider key characters and moments you could reference to answer the question. You want to aim for at least 3. And then once again, the optional last step, which I would definitely do, write out the codes for the mark scheme to keep you on track and so you don't forget anything. So pause the video to make sure you've made a note of this. So let's start with step 1, writing down the question and highlighting and annotating it. So could you write down all of the following? The novel shows that no person can be completely good. How far do you agree with this view? Explore at least 2 moments from the novel to support your ideas. 40 marks. Pause the video to do this now, making sure you highlight key words and annotate with key ideas. Okay, so we've got no person. Are you able to think of anyone in the novel who's completely good? Also, completely good, so that means not a mix of good and bad. And then agreeing. How far do you agree means that you need to evaluate, meaning that you need to consider the question from different viewpoints or perspectives. So always remember, with that evaluation, you're always showing both sides. Though you're trying to come down more on one side, so you've got an argument where you have a position, but you do need to have a counter-argument showing the other side, which you then potentially knock down. So it's a similar structure to that which we've been looking at in functional writing, showing that everything sort of links together. You've got your main position, your main argument, a counter-argument showing the other side, which you could then knock down. Though, of course, since this isn't to persuade someone, you don't necessarily need to knock down your counter-argument. You can just show it exists. And do make sure you have an introduction and conclusion. So explore at least 2 moments. So that's another key thing to underline or annotate. And here you can also jot down if any ideas come to mind about the moments you may want to use. you can jot that down beneath the 2 moments. So please make sure you've annotated and highlighted in your book. Okay, so on to the next step. Which characters might you want to write about? I would advise at least 2. And which moments could you refer to? Again, try to jot down at least 2 moments. So pause the video to do this now. Okay, so these are some moments and characters. I would, of course, start with Dr. Jekyll. He is the eponymous character. He's the character that lends its name to the novel. So I would start with him. Of course, he shows both his evil side, with the trampling of the young girl and the murder of Carew, and his desire for goodness, attempts to be good following the murder, and his refusal to let Hyde escape at the end. Remember, he steps on the key and he doesn't let him escape. So in terms of context, that's something we really need to focus on getting into our essays. Jekyll's experiment to create another persona developed out of the repression of the Victorian gentleman. His creation of Hyde stemmed from the contemporary fear that our sins might entirely take over, and from the horror of Darwin's theory of evolution, that we might regress to our animal selves, or that some of us were not properly evolved from our animal selves, or that we still had an animalistic side to us. Of course, is contrasted with the prevailing Christian view that had existed beforehand, that we were all created in the image and likeness of God, and therefore were intrinsically good. Now we've got a shift to the belief that we have that battle going on inside us. We are good and evil commingled. So I would definitely start with Dr. Jekyll and his duality that we see throughout. And Dr. Lanyon's another good character to use. So for the most part, unlike Dr. Jekyll, he epitomises the traditional Victorian gentleman, with his socially acceptable views on religion, condemning Jekyll for his scientific heresies. But he watches Hyde transform, and when he does not have to. This could reveal a hidden desire to explore a darker side to science. In terms of context, you could talk about how Victorian society's distrust of certain branches of science may have inhibited Lanyon's exploration into other scientific areas, as he did not want to associate with anything not considered respectable or acceptable. He feels shocked, but you might also say contaminated, by what he sees Jekyll do, showing he cannot live with having seen such horror and evil, because as you may remember, he was dead within 2 weeks of having witnessed the transformation. So a very different character to Jekyll. Unlike Jekyll, who seems to be having a constant battle with good and evil, Lanyon is much more within the camp of goodness and is deeply, deeply shocked and disturbed by the evil he witnesses, indicating he doesn't have much evil inside of him. So could you pause the video, please, to make a note of these points? So you may also want to talk about Utterson. Utterson is mostly a good character. He tries to get Jekyll to come out when he's sitting at the window, and he breaks the door down to find the truth. And he's introduced as a good man. So 3 moments you could refer to: incident at the window, trying to coax Jekyll outside, breaking the door down in The Last Night, chapter 8, and also at the beginning of chapter 1, he's introduced as the last reputable acquaintance in the lives of downgoing men. So introduced as a really moral, good character. However, he isn't perfect, as his past was fairly blameless, yet he was humbled to the dust by the many ill things he had done. So he does have that hint of darkness to him, and that's in chapter 2. Utterson appears upright, but admits to some wrongdoing. Does he do enough to uncover the mystery, or is he complicit, part of, the wrongdoing by not exposing the truth about Jekyll sooner? So you could talk about context here. The need to preserve one's reputation and that of others prevents Utterson from exposing his friend sooner. So maybe there's a conflict between morality and society's expectations. You can't be the perfect Victorian gentleman and listen to your conscience. And finally, you may want to talk about Enfield, returning from someplace at the end of the world, in chapter 1. Where has he been so late at night? Although he is otherwise seemingly respectable, and asks for God's forgiveness when he sees Jekyll's face at the window in chapter 7, showing a respectable side. So context here, you could talk about the need to appear respectable while still carrying out illegal or disreputable behaviour. It was acknowledged that there was hypocrisy at the heart of Victorian society, highlighted through the placement of this quote in chapter 1. So everything is set against a backdrop of hypocrisy and secrecy, which is an important link to this idea of duality which pervades the novel as a whole. So could you pause the video to make a note of those two characters and the notes I put on the slide? So now that you've annotated the question and you've identified moments and characters you want to talk about, your next step is drawing up a detailed plan. So what are you going to write in each paragraph? Thinking about how you can meet the success criteria. So what I'd like you to do is write out your paragraph names, so paragraph 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, for example, and next to each paragraph, write what you're going to include within that paragraph. Remember, the essay does need to explore at least 2 moments in detail, but it does not have to be structured entirely around the moments. So as long as you've referred to the moments, the essay can be structured by character or any other way you would like, or by theme. So pause the video to write out your plan. Okay, so this is what I would do. This doesn't mean this is the only correct way to do it, it's just the plan I would adopt because it's how I would view the question. So introduction. Set out position, agreeing mostly with the statement. In paragraph 1, I would write about Jekyll's evil side, Mr. Hyde, referring to the trampling of the young girl, key moment 1, and the Curry murder, key moment 3. So that's where I'm referring to my 2 moments in detail. Then in paragraph 2, I would write about Jekyll's good side, as shown after the murder, and I may reference other quotes throughout the novel talking about how he is good as well as evil. Paragraph 3, I would write about Utterson and how he is mostly good but not entirely. So I would focus primarily on the introduction to Utterson in chapter 1 and talk about how mostly he is presented as the epitome of the Victorian gentleman and very moral, but then he does have wondering almost with envy at the high spirits involved in their misdeeds, and other quotes which show that there are hints that he has a darker side. And then in paragraph 4, I would write about Lanyon and how he's mostly good but not entirely either, because if he was entirely good, I would argue he wouldn't have stayed to witness the transformation of Hyde back into Jekyll if he didn't have that curiosity. So you could link that to Utterson in chapter 1, wondering almost with envy. So wondering, that verb, if it wasn't for Dr. Lanyon wondering what was going to happen, that curiosity, maybe he would have left and he wouldn't have died. So maybe Dr. Lanyon and Utterson, they both have that curiosity in evil, which you could argue is evil itself. Or you could say they were both curious, but that doesn't amount to evil. Depends on your perspective. And then finally, I would have a conclusion, restating my position, agreeing mostly with the statement, but arguing that maybe Utterson and Lanyon didn't have any evil in them, they were just curious about it. So that's what I would do. But the thing about this question is it depends on your perspective. And the benefit of this question actually is I think it's easier to demonstrate critical style and an argument because you need to structure it around your position in relation to the question. So I would say it's actually easier to get across your argument and demonstrate that critical style if you do this question. But it is typically a bit harder because you're given less guidance. So that's what I would do. I would like to make sure, please can you make sure you have a plan like mine, it doesn't have to be the same as mine, written out in your book, that you can use for revision purposes. So pause the video to check over your plan or copy this one down. Okay, so for the remainder of today's lesson, I would like you to start writing your essay. So use the remaining time to, I would at least like an introduction and 1 paragraph. So please use the remaining time to do that now. If you've got extra time, of course, please do write some more, but at minimum, I would like introduction and 1 paragraph. So pause the video to do that now. Okay, and that is the end of today's lesson. So I hope you found it useful. Remember, the discursive essay is an option, don't just disregard it, please do read both when it comes to your exam. So that's the end. Thank you very much for all your hard work this week. You've done really well. I'll talk more about your speeches on Tuesday, sorry, but overall they were utterly excellent. I was so impressed. And do make sure you've read your comment. Okay, so have a lovely, lovely weekend, and I shall speak to you again on Tuesday.